Critics often claim that Joseph Smith did not die as a martyr since he offered resistance. Walter Martin claims, "Martyrs are people who willingly submit to death for their convictions, leaving final justice to God." He also asserts, "Self-defense is understandable, but hardly a qualification for martyrdom." What does it mean to be a martyr? Based on the definition, the main requirement is for someone to choose death for their religion, beliefs, or a cause, rather than renounce them. Whether the person offers resistance or not does not matter. It does not matter if the cause is popular or even just. Some Muslims today engage in offensive, aggressive actions and kill themselves for causes many would find to be wrong. Often we call them terrorists, but for some Muslims, they are called martyrs. There are examples of Christian martyrs who have died in history while resisting. In this example, Christians are chased by Japanese soldiers. It says, quote, "to defend themselves to the very last extremity." And, "the Christians defended themselves with great bravery." In this example, Protestant martyrs armed themselves against an armed group backed by Catholic bishops and monks. It says, "some armed themselves, and skirmished with the troops." Though martyrs like Jesus, Paul, and Stephen did die without offering much resistance, this was not always the case. Paul protected himself with the Roman legal system. Jesus found ways to escape threatening groups like in Luke 4:30. Passiveness is not a requirement in becoming a martyr. Many times martyrs die not because they choose to offer no resistance. They may lack any means available to them to resist, leaving them hopeless. The reasons why Joseph Smith was arrested is not relevant. Martyrs are killed by people who believe they have a cause for killing them. The Jews had their reasons to execute Jesus. Does that mean he was not a martyr? The 200 or so armed men did not storm the jail Joseph Smith was over an accusation of Joseph part in destroying the Nauvoo Expositor Press or allegations of Joseph may have been involved in an assassination attempt of Missouri Governor Lilburn Boggs. Had any other person been charged of such acts, the men in the mob would have been content that the accused was arrested and would face trial. They stormed the jail because they hated Joseph Smith, and his cause and religion. They hated Joseph Smith and the church over religious teachings they considered to be not Christian. They hated Joseph Smith and the church over practices like polygamy even though that practice did not affect them personally. They hated Joseph Smith and the church over politics like slavery. Members often voted as a bloc, and when gathered in large numbers, they affected the political power dynamics of the area. That is why the mob attacked Joseph Smith while he was in jail. Involvement over destroying the Nauvoo Expositor was just an excuse. Joseph Smith had been arrested on bogus charges a number of times in his life. Yet as his final days approached, he understood his time was short and would have to give up his life to save the church as a whole. Addressing the Nauvoo Legion on June 18, 1844, Joseph said, "I do not regard my own life. I am ready to be offered a sacrifice for this people." Joseph Smith said on June 22, 1844, "I told Stephen Markham that if I and Hiram were ever taken again we should be massacred, or I was not a prophet of God." After a warrant was issued for his arrest, Joseph along with Hiram Smith went across the Mississippi River to seek refuge. Some Latter-day Saints caught up with them and told them of the need for them to return or members in the area would face mobs. Joseph turned himself in rather than have members of the church come under threat. He knew that this decision was a death sentence. This passage in the history of the church has Joseph and his brother Hiram discussing the situation. Hiram suggests they go back and Joseph responds by saying in this record, quote, "If you go back I will go with you, but we shall be butchered." This is clear indication that this decision he believed would result in certain death. William Clayton wrote on June 24, 1844 in his journal that Joseph Smith knew that he had to give himself up or a mob would commit a massacre in Nauvoo. When Joseph Smith made the decision to give himself up, it was at this moment he sealed his fate of being a martyr. Regardless of what happened next, this move was according to Joseph Smith would lead to his death. Joseph Smith said in this example, "I am going like a lamb to the slaughter." Critics insist that any assertion of dying like a lamb to the slaughter must require submission without resistance. Who says that lambs die without resistance? When animals detect stress and danger, they usually do whatever they can to flee. No lamb happily walks up to be slaughtered. If they could talk, they would not say, "Please chop my head off." It is more likely that Joseph Smith was using this phrase regarding the inevitability or certainty of death rather than willingness. Lambs usually do not escape from their fate. Why did Joseph Smith have a pistol with him in jail? Not sure on that one. He understood giving himself up meant he would die, but the circumstances of how it would all play out he did not know. He probably expected sort of trial and punishment even if it was a joke. Perhaps he accepted the legal process but wanted to protect himself against some rogue individual taking him out before the process was done. Perhaps he armed himself simply to protect the lives of the others with him. A martyr does not require other people's lives being taken with them. There is no reason to believe he thought a mob of 200 armed men would come after him. What use is a pistol against something like that? What is important is that he made no attempt to use this pistol to escape as you would expect from a criminal. Why did Joseph Smith jump from the window? Even if one is willing to give their life, natural impulses of the moment tell a person to flee danger just as one recoils from heat. Alternatively, perhaps Joseph made a quick decision to jump out to spare the lives of Willard Richards and John Taylor. The mob was mainly after Joseph Smith. They did not care as much for those who were with him. If this is the case, it worked as they survived. By definition, Joseph surrendered his life for the cause to save the church and others and was thus a martyr. This does not mean it proves he was a prophet of God. It just proves he would rather give up his life for the cause he believed in and the people he loved than spare his life by renouncing the church. He could have done that and perhaps his life would have been spared. It is one piece of evidence against the view that Joseph Smith was a con man. Generally, con men don't put their lives in danger in defense of the con they are promoting. Con men are selfish in nature. To surrender to arrest which you know will lead to your death in exchange to spare the lives of others is a selfless act.